want to give a few hints about how to use RStudio a little better. One of the first questions, how do I share my output and results? Whether you want to share with somebody in your study group or you want an instructor to see a homework assignment, you want to share your research with the discipline. I'm going to give you a bunch of possibilities and remind it's okay if you don't start off great from day one. But on the other hand, you want to be steadily improving. One of the easiest ways to share is take a screenshot of your output. Really ugly kludge version is to use your phone to take a picture of the screen and even a video as you scroll through results. It's not optimal, but on the other hand, we've all done that. There are times when various reasons that may be where we're at. But on the other hand, you want to start developing better options. Next up with the ladder would be to have a file where you copy paste the commands and copy paste the output, maybe comment. That's, again, ugly enough, we can do better. Can use a file called RMD, that's R Markdown File. Creates one computer code that has text of your output and the code that runs it all joined together. With this Markdown file, you can tell it, okay, what output should be made. An advantage of the integrated Markdown file is when I want to write up my results, if I have a separate word processing file, then I would have to type, for instance, the average value was, and then go over to the data and analysis program, copy paste into the Google Doc. That's fine to do once or twice, but it's really not efficient. And it's error prone. Sometimes your finger slips, copy paste, or it drops a digit. Or you make a change later on, even the most minor change. You got to go back and update all these, and you got to remember, maybe you missed one. It's just inviting errors. You create the RMD file in RStudio, you knit it together. See, I put a red circle around the knit command there. The Markdown file allows you to have a single program that creates a document. So in here, it types the BRFS data has, and then says basically, okay, R, now calculate the number of observations and insert it right here in a pretty number. You can do tables and charts in the same way. It's a tremendously useful capability. And now, as with many things in this class, you might say, yeesh, I can just barely, I'm clinging by my fingertips. I cannot bear to learn one goddamn thing more. In which case, fine, you do not have to learn this one goddamn thing more. On the other hand, you may be like, hey, maybe I'm getting this, or maybe at some point down the line you feel that way, and you learn it. One of my goals in this class is to convince a bunch of you that it could be a good career. If you find that you enjoy learning new stuff, then it's a really good career option. It pays good money. I'm proud of all the students that go on. A lot less work experience than me, make a lot more money than I do. I'm teaching here at the public schools, but the private sector pays pretty well. Maybe at some point down the line, you'll want to come back and learn this better. Just put a pin somewhere in your brain. Metaphorical pin. Please do not put an actual pin in your brain. Don't be literal. So the output is going to be an MD file, which is a Markdown file, and GitHub knows exactly how to display that. That's how I put up a bunch of the documents for this course. You can output other types of files, such as web page, HTML, or PDF, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint type slides. There are a ton of different output choices. There's a link to our Markdown cheat sheet, gives some popular choices. One of the virtues of the Markdown is, again, it integrates narrative and the calculations. See that code at the bottom that says pretty num, calculates the number, and tells R how to write it out. That way, if the data set changes, one of your teammates goes through and notices, oh crap, we had an extra line, or something went wrong, blah, 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 or I found a few more observations, or something like that, then it just automatically updates. You're not copy-pasting from R to your Google Docs file or something. If you're doing this as a job for your career, you might have regular reports that get run, in which case you can automate it at all. Last month we had blank, and tell R, just count it up, dude, and it puts that in the document and makes it a lot easier for you. I realize it's a little more complicated to write it out the first time, but it's a goal you can aspire to as the semester goes on. by the end of the class, you're going to have to write a substantial report. You want to be getting to be a better storyteller. Analytics is not just doing the complicated technical stuff, it's also explaining why the technical stuff is important and explaining what it means. You need to communicate your findings. You cannot just vomit out the raw output. I mean, early in the class, that's okay, just to show you can do it, but you're going to want to have good tables and charts and nice output to explain what's going on. Partly because that's how you gain the understanding yourself. We humans are narrative thinkers. You can make your code fancy for varying levels of fancy. At the beginning, it may be pretty simple, but you get better as you go along. I'll show you the steps so you can see what's going on behind the scenes. You can read the knitted output and then look at the markdown file that created that output. You go through each of the steps. Plain markdown file readable by GitHub is meant to be very plain. It's not supposed to be fancy fonts and colors or whiz-bang stuff. It's plain text, very simple. If you want to create other fancier or lovelier output, then you can discover those ways. There are even people who are creating artwork with R. That cheat sheet has some of the basic stuff like headers and bold and underline and tables. Another component of RStudio is the ability to create projects. A project is a really useful way to keep all your code together in its own folder. I know the typical method is just shove all those files at random on your Google Drive and whatever. If you want to be a hoarder, if that's really how you want to live your life, then that's on you. But I will exhort you to do better. Better ways create each project in a separate folder with all the files there. Then you can easily port it around, share it with other people. Each time you start the session, you just double-click on the R project file. I've shown that example how it works. Your operating system might hide the file extension. You might have to squint to decipher what icon it is, or you can give it a good name. But you double-click on that file, brings up RStudio, everything right back where you left off. We want to create projects that are replicable. That's a fundamental principle of how science is done. Somebody else should be able to take your file, run the same commands, get the same output. The idea of replicability is a fundamental aspect of doing science right. One of the key parts of the scientific enterprise is somebody else can take the same data and get the same answer. It's a way of demonstrating your conclusions are valid. You provide replicable commands so somebody else will get the same answers if they did the same things. It's also relevant because you're working in groups and you want to keep your team together. If I do it and another team member does it, then we damn well better come up with the same output. Most jobs involve teamwork. This is a useful career skill. It's another reason I'm encouraging you to figure out GitHub, because it's a useful way to demonstrate your skills to somebody like a prospective employer. But if all the files are to do a particular analysis are all in the same folder, it's easy to share that folder. Don't be a hoarder with a huge random collection of junk. Particularly if you want to come back to the code at a later date. Maybe even just a week later. I mean, depending on how much fun you had over the weekend, you might not remember everything you did previously. Be nice to yourself, to your future self. Your future self will appreciate the time you're putting in now to be more organized.